loud. That's a squeaky chair, isn't it?
It is a squeaky chair.
Of course, we've sat down, so now one of the dogs wants to go out.
Of course it does. How you going, everyone? Let's see how we go with this.
No barking or yapping, okay?
I'd leave that open for her then, because she's going to come back in a second.
Go out and barking yet.
So, I think we finally recovered from line breaker.
Speak for yourself.
I haven't, but...
You haven't recovered?
No, but I'm trying to be positive. That was a fruitless exercise.
It really was.
So,
Come on. Come on. Keep talking.
I was just having a drink. Isik says, why is nothing on? It's definitely on. I've made sure
Why is nothing on? That's a good question, Isik. Why is nothing on?
I'm assuming it's to do with the delay in what we see compared to what he sees, because the microphone's picking up.
Bud, can you just grab me my phone off the
And
couch
the,
so I can double check?
And the stream's showing us as live, so...
It is live, it just came up on my phone.
Okay, what can you see?
Yeah, I'll just check now.
Got one of the viewers saying they can't see.
I'm
So
subscribed,
both of our children are looking. Well, two of our children. We have three, don't we?
We do.
Oh no, I can see it.
Yeah, it's all working.
Okay. Awesome. So.
Alright, you two, bed.
Yes.
So yeah, we got back from Albany very late on Sunday. What?
Just coming home was just a comedy of errors, wasn't
Oh,
it?
yeah. I don't know if you you would have seen on the Facebook page, Emma put a photo of the video of the emu that tried to commit seppuku in front of us. That was an interesting trip all round. We left pretty much when I expected to, about 12:15 by the time we'd finished the inspection at the venue. And it was actually pretty smooth sailing until we hit... we left Kojonup. And Kojonup's about halfway home, and then we hit a set of roadworks, which on the way down had been this lovely, smooth, unsealed road.
In fairness, it was an unsealed road, so it was compacted red dirt.
Yeah.
It was an unsealed road, but actually that unsealed road had been a smoother drive than the sealed road that was before
It had,
it.
yeah.
So it was yeah.
And then we hit the pot marks, and that was 500 meters of
500 meters of that.
yeah, pretty much. The divots were big enough you could sink a basketball halfway.
Well,
they were huge.
A bit further down, they'd put some witches' cones in the in some of the potholes, and there was just like this much of the witches' cone poking out. So there was some seriously deep potholes.
So that shook us up. Like, that was crawling through that 500 meters. It was hard, and it's also all wet and muddy. So the car's sliding, the trailer's sliding, the wind's blowing. That was interesting. And then we got to Williams and had a coffee and started the last leg. The last leg is about 130 kilometres between Williams and home. And we'd been driving at that stage for about 3 hours, two and three quarter, 3 hours, give or take. And that last stretch of road at night is normally notorious for kangaroos. And we were there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that.
Probably 4, but anyway, yeah.
So it's still daylight, so not expecting to deal with any kangaroos.
To be fair, kangaroos do jump at all time of the day.
But normally you don't see them during the daytime. You see them at dusk.
Apparently that's a fallacy.
Well, I've never seen them.
I'm just saying, apparently that's a
No.
fallacy.
It must be true because I've never experienced
Oh,
it.
okay, right.
Yeah.
My mistake.
So then we were about 60 k's out of home. So not quite metropolitan, but pretty close. Well, 60 k's from our place is Mandurah, 60 k's from our place in
It was the middle of the bush, Michael.
Well, it was middle of the bush.
It was the middle
but
of the bush.
It was close to home. It was half an hour from home.
Anyway, there was an emu.
Yeah.
We've never seen a wild emu before.
No,
and there
we
was an
hadn't.
emu. Apparently it's the boy emus that look after the babies. There was an emu there with 4 babies.
So we slowed down because we
Which
saw
is
it.
very exciting because there was an emu and babies.
So we slowed down because we could see it a mile off. Plenty of time to slow down so we didn't hit it. No one behind us, so not a problem. The lady coming the other direction, on the other hand, wasn't quite as aware of it as we were. And apparently it was the male emu, decided to try and cross the road, and it ran basically headfirst into the side of her car as it came back towards us at 110 k's an hour. She did a great job of not crashing immediately after that impact. and the emu basically did a Tony Hawk 1080 spiral flip
So kind of
pirouette.
the emu went into the side of the car and then went down, caught the wheel.
And yeah, it spiraled. It was...
Got back up again.
Well, that was the thing. We were both... Like, we'd stopped at that point and thought, oh, you know, what are we going to do? We have to call a ranger? Are we going to have to get it off the road? And if it's wounded, what do we do? And then it got up. And then charged the car.
It didn't charge the car.
Well, you thought it did because...
I didn't think it did. It started coming towards us.
It wasn't happy.
Well, no. I think I might know why it wasn't happy.
Yeah. The cloud of feathers was amazing when it got hit.
Oh my God, you're a horrible person. Anyway, moving on. We made it home.
It was definitely an experience. And... yes, the emus are back to finish the job of the Great Emu War of the 1900s.
Exactly. I tell you what, I know why they won the Emu War. And also, prior to leaving Albany, we'd been talking about, you know, if there's a zombie apocalypse, who do we want on our side? I want the emus on my side.
You don't want a zombie emu. That'd just be all kinds of bad.
I don't know that there'd be any issue with them becoming zombie emus.
You never
anyway.
know. So the weekend itself was really good. The Warhammer camp's always good fun. So we had 28 players, including myself, start, because we did have a very late dropout. So we had 27 active players and me filling in. We got down there at a good time Friday night. Emma enjoyed herself Friday night.
What happens on Warhammer Camp stays on Warhammer Camp unless it's me that's making fun, and it's not, so move on.
If there's anyone in the chat who was with us on...
No, we're moving on.
We had 4 games at 2,000 points on the Saturday. I saw Isik sharing photos from the event because obviously a lot of the photos had the Weyland-Yutani terrain on them. And I played the first 2 rounds before we had another player drop through illness and I say illness, self-inflicted. So I got 2 games, which I was pretty happy about. And then I think the last game finished about 9 o'clock that night. It was quite a late finish.
It was a very long day. So part of that is last year we had feedback from the players that, because we did 3 games last year, which I think they were 3-hour games from memory. Were. So it's still 9 hours of play, plus when you add the breaks and you're looking at a 10-hour day. But we've got the venue all day, so hey, why don't we add another game in?
Yeah.
Which seemed like an okay idea when you're talking about it, 2-3 weeks after the event. But the day of the event is less of a good idea when you're looking at it going, okay, lunch break is 2:30, dinner break is 9:30.
Yeah, it was late, a late finish.
It was late. It was a very late finish.
A couple of the guys had suggested we should do 1 game on the Friday night. And then 3 on the Saturday.
That's tricky as well because we have some people who didn't get there until 10 o'clock.
Very, very late. Yeah.
Yeah, because Hugh forgot to book.
Yeah,
the
well
day
done,
off.
Hugh. That was awesome. The fact that he was going, like his boss is one of the other players' wives, so she knew he couldn't call in sick and all the rest of it. So, yeah, they got down there quite late. But anyway.
That's our last game ended 9:25.
Yeah, last game finished 9:35.
Okay, in fairness, the last game should have finished at 9 and everything was running on time for that to finish on time. And as a result of the fact that that game went so long, I did suggest that we should have disqualified Earl.
Look, I'm sure he would have thoroughly appreciated that after playing that game for the 3 hours.
3.5 hours.
The 3 hours it took to finish.
Yeah, so that, and with a lot of our events, we do kind of think if they're top table, we do try and allow space for possibly for that to go over, particularly in events like this, because it does allow for making sure that we know who won the game.
Rather than getting a turn 3 finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that everybody else finished that game at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
We'd all finished dinner by 9:35 when they...
Yeah, we were kicking them to go on
game.
Feet, eat, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, congratulations to Earl on taking it out.
I don't know how loud... So we recorded the podcast on the Friday night.
Yes, that was done live.
Well,
it was recorded...
It's always recorded live. But never recorded one dead.
But we recorded it, and I compressed it, updated it. There was no editing involved.
It was recorded on the spot rather than recorded
and uploaded
live.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how much background noise there was in that, and I'm wondering whether or not it was actually quieter than we normally have with the bird.
Yeah, it could have been, yeah. So yeah, we finished up, and then Sunday morning, again, some sore heads, and everyone packing up to go home. Special shout out to the hooligans who managed to hire a car that was so small they were sitting like they had to unroll their sleeping bags and spread them out flat.
To be fair, it looked like a decent sized car from the outside.
It was smaller than our X-Trail.
Yeah, well, we can fit four fully grown people in our X-Trail.
Hugh and JD are not short. They are both 6.5 feet tall.
I'd say actually it's less about the people who were getting in the car and more about the fact that there were 4 army cases. Although, saying that, Hugh and JD only took 1 model each.
That is true. Although they did take up a case each. Because both of them decided to take a Warhound.
Yeah, but their case to fit a Warhound in would be smaller than the case that you took for your army.
Well, not by much. They assembled them down there, so maybe they got them in smaller cases, but...
Assembled them down there. They also de-assembled them down there.
Yeah, one of them got knocked off the table.
No, I was more thinking about ripping them off the base because it turned out they couldn't actually deploy them.
Yeah, JD had put his Warhound on quite a significant size base. It would have been 12 inches across. It was huge because of the way he modelled it onto a piece of terrain. So we ended up looking at the tables on the Friday night, and he pulled the piece of terrain off of the MDF so that it could actually move about on the tables.
It was still on a base.
It was still on a base, but it was a significantly smaller base.
Yeah.
He took the other base home. Whether he's going to assemble it and finish it, I don't know. But we'll see.
Did you see me then? I filtered.
You did. Haven't had enough of those. So it was a really good weekend. We always enjoy heading down and playing games and hanging out. And but it is a very long weekend for us because Monday morning you had to get up and go to work. And
I was really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some of the exciting things that came out of it, the
differential.
Differential was very much voted. That was a no vote that came in from that. No, I was more thinking about the discussion on Saturday night and the group. The group process of deciding that a Men of Warhammer calendar was a good idea.
Yeah, so...
I'm wondering whether or not in the cold light of day and sobriety, they still think that's a good idea.
We would love to hear from anyone watching this and their female partners if they have one. Would they be interested in buying a Men of Warhammer calendar? Because...
I'm suggesting the market is quite niche.
Yeah. We did have about half a dozen of them say, yep, we'll do it. And I think a lot of it comes off the back of Shane's photo on his objective markers, which if you haven't seen them, the Dice in Combat Squad objective markers feature Shane lying on a desk holding Indomitus across his nether regions with the Dix logo prominently displayed on the neoprene objective marker. And I think that was what got the conversation going is, we could do a Men of Warhammer and put box sets in front of strategic areas. So I'd be really interested to see whether there was any sort of market. I mean, if there was one person that wanted that, that would be amazing. That's the dogs telling us there's a cat outside. But in the meantime, I'd love to hear some feedback from people who might turn around and go, yeah, you know what, I definitely want one of those.
Sorry.
Sorry. The response... Oh, hang on. We've got Bananarama. Yeah, nah. Quote my wife.
I can never remember who's Bananarama.
I don't know. I'm going to say that they are definitely someone who made it down to Albany.
I know that we've done this before, and I know who it is, but I just can't remember.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting comment straight away. Not even the dog likes that idea.
Yeah, they've all vetoed it.
Look, the fact that Emma is a professional photographer, I think, combined with that photo of the Dix is what headed that conversation that direction. That would just be a weird experience, I think. Hiring a gaming hall, setting up a gaming table with strategic height buildings and...
Okay, you clearly thought about this a lot.
Did you not hear them talking about it?
No.
Well...
I may have been in a different room at that time.
Trying to avoid the conversation?
No. Just came in partway through a conversation.
Oh, it's Ben Arnie. The best Ben. So, look, he didn't volunteer, to be fair. He wasn't one of the volunteers. No, he'd gone home by then. I think so, yeah.
Yeah. No, most definitely. This was a 2 a.m. conversation.
It was quite late that night, wasn't it? But regardless, that was an idea that was proposed, and we said, you know what? We'll put that out there and see what happens. And we've just done that. So I think we've done our due diligence at this moment.
I think the idea was that it would be 12 months from now, so people had the opportunity to
bulk up and
get photo
slim
ready.
Down and do whatever they need to do. But, you know...
Anyway, moving on.
It could be good to do a fundraiser thing and see how many we sell, but...
Again, I'm not
I don't think we sell many, but...
I'm not sure. Anyway.
Look, you know, you work for a women's mental health service. Let's sell the Nerds of Warhammer calendars for raising money.
I did float it at work.
What did they say?
I'm not going to share the response.
Look, we just need the right people.
And actually, I think that whoever said no.
So IT Crowd did that and it didn't go well for the photographer. No, you haven't seen that episode of the IT Crowd,
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, it's bad. I'll show that one to you later.
Okay, awesome.
It's really bad. Because it was meant to be like the hot chicks of the accounting department and it ends up the nerds of the building. And the photographer's a guy who's really looking forward to shooting the girls of accounting and ends up shooting some questionable photos of the nerds of the building. So...
And I feel like I should add something to say that everybody's beautiful and all of that kind of stuff, since I've just made fun of the idea. So if you could imagine, I'm saying something lovely and inspiring and uplifting, which I do believe, obviously.
Regardless, I'm not being part of that calendar. That's just not happening.
That's a shame.
No go. No. It doesn't matter what I look like in 12 months' time. It's not happening.
Anyway. You can shush.
So, you know what? That was one of the ideas. Now, the idea of the differential was one that was also hotly debated before and after the event. Because we did try the WTC 20-0 differential scoring process.
Now, the feedback from, I believe it was Aaron, came back to say yes, but if it's anything but an actual draw, then it should have been a win-loss. Is that
that's not the way WTC...
That's not the way WTC... No. I had meant to ask that on the day, but got distracted.
It's a 0 to 5 is a draw.
Yeah, and that's what I thought, but I just, as I said, wanted to...
And I suppose the counterpoint is if it's an actual 0 to make a draw, then why do we not just use the normal score to begin with?
And I believe that may have been what we said at the time.
Yeah.
So just to fill in that conversation, so yes, there'd been a lot of discussion around using a differential rather than using just raw scores. And we did the podcast where we talked about that and what was the possible benefits of doing the differential. Then Mike got some feedback from Aaron and a couple of other people who said that there were things that we hadn't thought about. They made a good point. So we trialled it and the feedback was a resounding hell no. There were more draws in round 1 than there were for the round 1 of Linebreaker. So we had 28 players, 14 games. There were more draws for round 1 of Linebreaker than there were for the entire of Masters, which was 96 players playing 5 games over 2 days?
Masters was 80 players, so it was 240 games.
Yeah, so there were more draws in 14 games than there were in, did you say 240?
Yeah.
I can't hold information at the moment.
So Ben says, I liked the 20-0 because the draw to me implies that it's a closer game and thus more fun.
Interesting.
That was certainly not
I think you are an outlier.
Yeah, it was certainly not the feedback we had later in the evening with people.
I know you're saying later in the evening, but you were inside at lunchtime. I wasn't. I was outside. And the feedback by lunchtime was, Emma, why are we doing this? Do we have to do this for the next 2 rounds as well? And so I was saying, well, yes, we do. And you're going to go home and you're going to crunch the numbers and look at, would it have made a difference if we were going with raw scores over differential? So you did promise you'd do that, and as yet you haven't.
I actually started.
Okay, that's something.
It's not a simple process. Cause
I know it's not. I'm only teasing.
I did the first round actually on the Saturday night with one of the guys. It was only a rough thing because I just wanted to kind of show the thought process of what we wanted to do. And like you had guys like Shane Horvath who finished 2 wins and 2 draws, so essentially undefeated. Under raw scores, he went 4 wins. Now,
but at the same time, someone who went 2 wins and 2 losses also had the same results with, having 2 wins and 2 draws.
Well, no, because it would have been 2 wins and 2 draws is the same as 3 wins and a loss.
No, what I'm saying is Shane had 2 wins and 2 draws, right? But when you look at raw scores, then he had
Four wins.
He had 4 wins.
Yeah.
But somebody who went 2 wins and 2 losses could potentially have had 2 wins and 2 draws and had the same result.
No, you've lost me there completely.
Okay, let me try again. So, you have a differential of 5.
Yep, 0 to 5 is a draw.
0 to 5.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, 0 to 5.
0 to 5 is a draw. So, let's say that somebody scored 45 and their opponent scored 49.
Yep.
They lost because they scored 45.
Well,
Right?
that would have been a draw.
No, I know that would have been a draw. That's what I'm saying. So they would have lost the game, right?
Yeah.
But then with the differential, it's showing that as a draw.
Okay, yeah, I got you now.
So Shane was basically showing the same as somebody else who had...
Well, yeah, his opponents who were gotten draws would obviously then be showing a loss for those games. Yeah. Okay, I've got you now. Like I redid the first round to change over. We had 4 draws in round 1.
Mm-hmm.
When I converted those to win-losses, every single pairing in round 2 changed. And that's the other knock-on butterfly effect that you get.
And that makes it exceptionally difficult to be able to work out what the overall difference is of having differential versus win-loss.
Because it changes the pairings.
It changes all the pairings. And we don't know, for that particular scenario, whoever Shane's opponents were for those 2 that he drew, they would have been paired with people who had also lost. And Shane would have been paired, so they would have been paired down, Shane would have been paired up. So he would have had harder games, they would have had not easier, that's a terrible way to put it.
In terms of rankings, they would have paired down to other people on a similar win-loss.
That's it.
Yeah.
As opposed to them pairing in the middle. Now, what does that do?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the analysis we can do can only be done based on the data we have, not the data that might or might not have happened.
Yeah, exactly.
So all I can do is go through and change everything over to win-losses, then compile it all, get a stat card at the end based on the new win-loss ratios, and I've obviously got all the battle points there saved anyway. So we could essentially create a new leaderboard to show what would have happened if everyone had played...
If the pairings had stayed the same.
Yeah, exactly. If the pairings had stayed the same, what would have happened? Which doesn't give you a full picture, because, as we've just said, you could end up in a situation... Well, round 1, the pairings all changed.
Round 1, they stayed the same. Round 2, the pairings all changed.
So, yeah, it's an interesting exercise, and the funny thing is, it doesn't change who won, because even when I counted it back and looked at Earl versus Shane... Shane's battle points pushed him into second. Now, Shane finished third.
Yeah, but again, we don't actually know that, because you don't know if the pairings had changed.
Yeah, well, that's what I just said. I just said based on the data we have, first doesn't change, and then Shane moves from third to second.
Yeah.
And then it starts getting really murky because, Dan Norrish had 1 win and 3 draws. Now, I believe that he ends up on 3 wins and a loss if I convert it over, which means he jumps from about 8th to about 4th or 5th, which is obviously going to shuffle the upper mid card anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a tricky one.
It's not the resounding, and that's kind of where I was starting at lunchtime. The resounding feedback was, we don't like it. We don't want to do it. It's not working. And by the evening, after people had...
The majority of players were... I mean, Ben's the first that I've just seen that says, yeah, I didn't mind it.
Yeah.
I think if you convert it to a flat, it has to be a 0 to actually be a draw. And you basically go, okay, so 10-10 is a 0, and then you go, 1 to... the differential to get to a 20-0 is in the 50s from memory in terms of difference. And we actually saw quite a lot of those happen in the early round as well. So is the differential a 5-point changeover? It's easy to count, but is it actually too small? Should it be 6 points or 7 points in order to...
It doesn't matter whether it's easy to count or not, because Down Under Pairings does it. So you don't need to be good at the maths. Like in the old days, Bob Woolworth Bob many moons ago, we had to walk uphill to school there and back. We had to do all that by hand. And that was tricky for players because sometimes they couldn't add up to 20.
That is true.
So, if you're going back then, yes, I understand the need for ease, But now we don't need to be able to do our 6 times tables because Diffie's done it for us in all of the coding and ones and zeros and all that kind of stuff.
Now, we just had a question there asking how many 20 zeros we had. Now, I'm hoping that this is all still... It looks like it's still working the way I intended it, which is great. So if I go into the battle rounds, in round 1, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players get 20 points. So literally half the games were 20-0.
And how many were draws?
1...
You have to halve this.
Yeah, I was going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So 4. It was 4, I thought so. So you've got half that were
20-0
and the other half were draw. Oh, well, not 4. The other half. And then more than a quarter were draws.
Yeah, which means there were only like 3 other results, which is pretty bad. Round 2, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 20-0s. So that's more than half the round.
Did you only get 3 points in that one? No, you didn't.
I got 17 for that one.
All right, that makes more sense.
Round 3, we had only 2 20-0s in round 3. And I'll also have to go back and compare the missions for these ones as well, because it could be like the first mission we played, the secondary was direct assault, which is the one that you want to hold them. I can't think of the mission now. But other missions impacting how you score 20-0s.
And to be fair, I think that's difficult to say when you've only got 14 games.
Well, the good thing is we could also go back to other events and work out what, like, if you've got the time and energy.
Again, I really am calling somebody who finds this kind of stuff exciting. Get in touch.
And then we had no 20-0s in round 4.
Can you scroll down a minute? I'm trying to find... Okay, is this in alphabetical order?
No.
All right.
Oh, this side is, yes. What are you looking for?
Doesn't matter, I found it.
So, yeah, as the day went on, we had 7, 8, 3, and then none. So, is that as a result of... as a result of the pairing process where as the day goes on, the games get narrower as the pairing evens the games out between players and armies? Or is it a result of the mission? Or is it a result of a combination of those?
Normally, I would say that it would be as a result of the pairings. But I think that what this did is it gave us a flaw. It gave us a flaw in the pairings.
Look, potentially, yeah.
I think it does because, like I said, you've got the people who lost are not playing against the other people who lost because they're playing in this middle pool.
Yeah, because
so you've got this very small pool at one end, which is people who have lost, versus a very small pool at the other end. I don't know. Maybe it does work. If you're working with 3 pools, it's just this middle section.
It doesn't. It's certainly for a bracketed style pairing where you're trying to get to a single unique winner.
Yeah.
It's terrible. You don't want draws because that artificially impacts the brackets, and you end up with pair ups and pair downs within the brackets, and that's just not good. We ran this as Swiss, so basically, if you were the top number, you played the next top number every round.
Yeah, but I still mean that still gives you that.
Well, obviously, because the draws mean that you potentially, your next pair up or pair down was the person you just played.
So then you
have to pair a different, so it instantly starts messing with the middle. Ben says all I need to do is count to 6, 1 for each dice side. Speaking as someone who lives in the bottom half of the table, playing 3 hours for 0 points isn't a great time.
Yeah.
That's another
Who's
fact. That is John Cohen. If you need someone to excel and crunch numbers, it's it's my thing.
Yeah, great. I thought there'd be somebody who found that exciting. It's not my thing.
But and that there is a feel bad moment of that where you could score yourself 40 points, your opponent scores 90, and you get 0 as a result, which, there is that to take into consideration. I also don't know it helps team events any either, because you don't want draws, you want decisive results for the team. Because the last thing you want to do is end up with 2 wins, a loss, and 3 draws in a team of 6, and then you end up with a differential that means that the round draws as well. You want a winner for the round, ideally.
Well, and I know we did this last year, and I was very much pushing for that, and then there was an argument for doing it a different way and using the differential, but I can't remember what the argument for the differential was.
I do think I like the idea of seeding the first round to some degree.
Based on what?
Well, you can...
For a group one or for just in general?
I'm just talking about... So Ben makes a comment. I feel for round 1, it could have 20-0 come from competitive list versus casual list, and then casual list versus casual list made closer games. That is entirely possible as well. So for a moment there, my brain went, oh, you know what? If we seeded it, but then you end up with seed 1 playing seed 100, which means that you have the quintessential competitive versus casual, which means that by about round 3, you've probably filtered enough that you're starting to get the right sort of pairings happening. But, you know, it normally takes 2 or 3 rounds for that cycle of, you know, the winners and losers process to take effect, which is why you actually get, for like a 6-round tournament, the last 2 rounds are always really close games and they're always contested at every table in the room. Whereas the first 2 or 3 rounds can be a bit borderline depending on, you know, all it takes is for 2 very casual players to get paired up in round 1. One of them has a big win and all of a sudden he's then in a pool with the other competitive players, which means it takes him 2 more rounds to cycle back down to playing the other casual lists. So... yeah, it's a complex thing, and I just don't know that 20-0 helps resolve any of the issues. I think it just creates some additional ones that, yeah, it's a tough one.
It is.
And one of the reasons we talk about this on the podcast and here now is to kind of share this conversation, because we have had this...
Because we go round and round in circles.
Yeah, and we've had this before, and... you know, specifically for WATC, we've tried to mirror the ETC, WTC format so that players here in Perth get a taste of that experience and then can obviously seek to move on to the ATC and then potentially the ETC, WTC team in future years. So part of me goes, oh, well, if they're doing 20-0, we should do 20-0, but I'm not convinced that it's good for the process. And then we've only got 1 tournament and it's only a small data pool to show for it at the moment.
And the plan was that we were going to do it for
war calls
as well.
But at the same time, we've had
the overwhelming
please don't.
Yeah.
From the 28 players that we had.
Well, 27.
27. Yeah, my opinion doesn't count.
Actually, I was counting Ben, who was saying.
So Isaac says the idea for differential is this for WTC. At the moment, there is no incentive to stop your enemy from scoring. If you score 100 and your opponent scores 99, you still get a win-loss non-differential event. That means that your opponent does, or what you do, your opponent doesn't matter. Just play a single-player game and hope to score more than your opponent.
So, but I don't get that. That doesn't make sense to me, Isaac. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, so it does make sense to me. But surely it's your team's overall score versus my team's overall score. So I need to not only make sure that I'm managing to score as many points as I possibly can for my team, but I also want to make sure, so that I'm doing my part to make sure that I'm adding points to it. But I also want to make sure that I'm stopping my opponent scoring points, because what I don't want him to do, if Michael's my opponent and I've completely hammered him, because of course I would. So if I've won the game, so I've done my part for my team by winning, but then Mike's come in and he's lost by only 5 points. So then, say for example, there's, you know, somebody else on Mike's team has won by 20 points. I'm still down by 15. So I need to do everything I possibly can. You're not supposed to be there. Get on. Hop on. I need to do everything I possibly can to make sure that my team is getting the most number of points possible, but also that I'm stopping my opponent from scoring as many points as possible. So I'm doing both things to make sure that the difference between our team is highest.
Well, the trick is under ETC, WTC...
you don't need to look at
you don't need to win.
Yeah.
And this is a conversation that we've been having locally for about a week now, because we've got a small team event happening this coming weekend that I'm playing in. there was a conversation that was basically in the ETC, you need to get a differential total of 86 to win the round, which
But
means...
saying that, the ETC, they've got odd numbers, don't they?
No, they've got teams of 8.
Right, yeah.
So you can actually win a round at the ETC, WTC with 3 20-0s and then 5 losses. Is it 3?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You can't do it with 2, but if you can get 5, 45, 5 9s are 45, yeah?
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, 5 9s are 45.
What are 6 9s?
54.
54, 74, 84. Yeah, so you need 3 20-0s, and then you can have 3 max wins, and then your other 5 losses,
minor losses.
Well, I think they end up being, I think you can go to an average of about 8 per game, and still win the round.
And that was my argument for last year.
Yeah, and so we were talking about that locally for the 5. So it's 8 teams, 5 players a team. The conversation was, how do you win the round? And someone said, well, at the moment, if we do differential, you only need to win 2 of the games, and then you can win the round. And so the knock-on conversation becomes, is winning games more important than
how much you win them
by, and what the average losses are?
Yeah.
And I can't help but feel like...
so in the past, we've had it that people have thought that, yes, they do
for WTC, everyone needs to win by 11-9 is about the minimum standard. Yeah, the problem is, though, is that... It's
not just about minimum standard, because you do
if you had 8 games at 11-9, yeah, you win the round.
Yeah.
But you can win it with 3 20-0s and 5 minor losses.
Yeah.
And so the question then becomes...
Is it about
Is it about winning games, or is it about the score?
How many points you're getting, yeah.
Because... And this actually goes back to years ago when we were still working on battle points.
That's kind of what I'm doing in my head, going, is it about... Yeah, all of that.
Yeah. Is it more important to win the game, or is it more important to score points?
Yeah.
Because we used to do it based on points. And
which is kind of what I was just saying about the stopping your opponent from scoring, in which case. But, yeah, as you say, we've moved to that point because the community have said that they don't want...
They don't want to be in a position where 4 wins and 2 losses scores higher than someone with 5 wins and 1 loss.
Yeah. Or they don't want to be in a point... Yeah. That.
So, and obviously all the sporting analogies come into play there when they start saying, the differential is used, but the first part of that equation is, did you win or did you lose? So, at that point...
So I guess when it comes down, that be your count back. If it comes down to a draw with 3 and 3, then that's when you start going, well, how much did you... And so that's what your incentive is, to actually stop your opponents from scoring.
Yeah, and I think I'd be happier to say, okay, you need to win the majority of games, and if you don't win the majority, you can still win the round, and then it counts back to whatever your scores were.
Well...
Which is kind of what we tried to do for last year, and it didn't work.
Look, I think it had some merit. But for me, the simplest way is you just go out of 90 and you just go, okay, so everyone's got the possibility of getting to 90. You need to make sure that you're getting as many points as possible. You need to be stopping your opponent getting as many points as possible, because the reality is you need your team to win 4 of the 6 games, because for us we have teams of 6. You need your team to win 4 of the 6 games. But if it comes to a situation where you've won 3, then we use the overall points as count back.
Yeah.
So that's where your incentive is to stop them scoring as well.
But at that point, do we then say, okay, we've got 3 and 3. Is there a margin of error there between the 2 teams? Like, if one team wins by a point overall, do they still win the round?
Yeah, because they won.
Even on the count... What I'm saying is on the count back.
Yeah, because they won.
Okay, that's interesting, because I would have given a margin for error to assume a draw, because they hadn't... I wouldn't want to do that for the... Like, if you win 4, it doesn't matter by how much you win. Mm-hmm. But I figure if you're going to that count back step...
No, because this is the whole thing with my argument for what Issik's saying. This is why you need to stop your opponent from scoring points, because a point matters.
Okay.
Because I'm not playing. If I was playing, I'd be having other ideas. Hop on.
So he says, at an event with just win-loss, you can win an event by just getting 1 point every round. Doesn't matter the difference. You can crush 4 of your opponent's 20-0 and take a loss 9-11. Should a person who won 5 games be ahead of you? Yeah, they should. If you win 5 games out of 5, 13-7, and another player gets 4 wins and a loss and goes 80 not like...
Look, I'm going to sound like I'm backflipping here, and possibly I am, who knows. But it does come down to that. If you have 5 minor wins versus 4 crushing wins and 1 absolute minor defeat, then should the person who got those 4 minor wins still
5 minor wins,
minor wins, should they still win over someone who got 4 crushing wins and 1 minor defeat?
In my opinion, yes, and that was the conversation we as a community in WA had back in 2018.
Yeah, and that's what was it. 2018? Was it before that? 17
or 18, I forget.
Yeah. It was however long ago. So I know that was definitely the consensus here at the time. I'm assuming it's still the consensus, but I'm not sure that we've put that out and asked as far as the crushing wins versus minor wins.
Well, no, I mean, obviously you can look at what... Isaac saying it's about choice. One or the other side isn't necessarily better. No, absolutely. It's also about us balancing the expectations of the community with, how we want the events to be recorded and... seen from external players. With the ITC format where they give you 1,000 points for a win, 500 for a draw, and 0 for a loss, it's essentially win-loss at that point.
Yeah.
They're just not tracking it as an individual stat. They're just adding points to a number. But it does the same job. And, that's been like that for the ITC for a number of years now. So... is it regionally based where the expectation of the community with the American ITC is no, win-loss, win-loss, versus an expectation from the European community that's no, the amount of points and the amount how you win and how many points you win by is a more important factor. And is that just a case of us trying to establish what the baseline is for our community to say, you know what, these are the 2 most prominent options. How does everyone feel about them so that we can understand how best to serve the community events they want to play in?
Yeah, yeah.
So, Emma is right about there needed to be a line to call a win or loss. 86 points is the WTC line to choose. Yep, 86 is drilled into my brain after I attended it back in... it's nearly a decade ago now that I was there. Have to go again.
Well, that'd be all well and good if it was running, wouldn't it?
Well, there's that.
So, I feel like this is possibly an argument we don't need to have tonight.
That's true.
And I suppose that's another thing that does stick in my head, and I'm trying to work out how to say it respectfully, because I do mean it respectfully, but, we talk about how we're trying to make sure that our events, I guess that players are transferable from our events into ATC and into WTC. But the reality is that with everything that's happening in the world at the moment, those events aren't running. So we're assuming that ATC is going to be happening
October
this year, as though that date seems to be being pushed back regularly. Hop on.
Well, it was May, and then it was July, and now it's October.
Yeah, that's what pushback means.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that happened within the space of about a week at the start of the year. So it's not like it's changed a few times.
Okay, well, that's how I've heard it. Is that?
No.
Anyway, so that
it was May. Then it was June because the entire WA team went, we can't go in June because one of them's having a wedding. So it was moved to October.
Yeah. So I have everything crossed that happens, and everything looks as though it will, but at the same time it might not. So I just feel like we kind of maybe need to play our own game for a little bit and then see what fits for us rather than trying to fit with... WTC have made these decisions based on theory
and history and...
Yeah, most definitely. But the history isn't this edition either.
No.
So, and that's what I say. I say this with respect because I do, I'm not saying that they've pulled numbers out of the air. A whole heap of hours has gone into the discussion and thought. And
Tom and Neil and Isiak, among others, have spent an awful lot of time in the background, like we do, trying to figure out the best way to run the event, and then they've got to consult with the 30-something captains about
God,
how
that must be fun.
How that looks and what whether the teams like it or don't like it. It's not an easy thing to just go, no, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not underplaying the decisions that they've made, but I'm just going to come back and say, is it just a regional thing where the expectations of our community are different to what the expectations are for the European community? So, because we've had that now for a couple of years where win-loss is the most important thing.
Saying that, when was the last time we asked people? But, when
Yeah.
was the last time we asked people? But at the same time, the feedback from the weekend, and that was a range of players, apart from Ben, who was the outlier there, a range of players from competitive to casual, relaxed gamers, all had something to say about the using the differential. Come on.
I don't know. It's certainly one that bears more conversation with our community to try and make sure everyone feels like at least it's not just an arbitrary decision.
Oh, look, given the amount that we bang on about, I think most people know that it's not an arbitrary decision. We just go around in circles repeatedly.
We still get people who think we make calls without playing this out. It's the same with every part of an event.
But yes, we do. But at the same time, how else can we share this? Like, we're talking about this in lots of different platforms and lots of different ways. So if people are still thinking that, then we're not going to be able to do anything about it.
No.
We're making it as transparent as we possibly can.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting pool of data to pull out, and I think that actually, you know what, we actually had a hybrid of that. Now I think about it, for Line Breaker anyway, because it was still ranked on win-loss rather than battle points. So it wasn't on your 20-0 score, it was on your... So instead of it being out of 80 to determine the winner, we still did it on round points at Line Breaker. So now there's another set of data we could apply and go, if we go the full idea of who got the highest out of 80, what does the rankings look like? Then we've got the hybrid version that we did, which was differential win-loss. And then the third version of that is the standard version, win-loss with standard battle points. So there's three very different... Because what we actually ran was a hybrid of the two, rather than a true... like the WTC format where your scoring points is more important than the win-loss. I wonder what it'd look like if we pulled that data out. And I'm sure that if Earl, being number one in two of those versions, and then the third one drops to like fifth, he might have something to say about that.
Well, not really, because that's the one that we used for that event.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. It's... I can actually probably have a quick look at that now while we're here chatting, because the battle points are at least something I can just sort the results by. But one of the advantages of using electronic scorecards. So if I just sort by battle points... Okay, so Earl still wins.
There's a surprise.
But it does shuffle the top four again, where Shane drops a spot, Connor picks up a couple of spots.
Marcus.
It does...
Hugh doesn't move.
No, Hugh's very definitely the bottom of the pool at that stage. I'm still 16th, which I'm pretty pleased with. Still 16th. Yay, me. Only played 2 games out of 4, still 16th. I'll take that. So, yeah, I don't know. It's... Maybe once we've got this data together in something that's understandable for the average player, because if we just supply the data and go, here you go, look at this, it doesn't necessarily mean anything to some people. But if we can explain the findings and go, this is the pool of data, this is where it came from, this is how the event ran, this is what the scores and the results look like. However, by changing the way it was scored, this is what it looks like and this is what it looks like, then it'll at least give players the opportunity to kind of look at it and understand what it could mean. So, educating them as much as telling them what we're doing. Ben says, and then there's a fourth version of scoring where Earl loses the fourth game for not finishing on time.
It's an option.
Look, I suppose it is technically.
Earl Chess Clock Clark.
Yeah.
Didn't finish on time.
No.
Just saying.
I think he had a clock at the table
He did.
well.
No, it was under the table.
Oh, by that stage it was under the table. He was using it earlier in the day. So... actually, there's a piece of feedback.
Don't you growl?
The event we've got in May that we've just shifted the date of has a projector. So we're actually going to be able to stream a giant clock on our wall
Wasn't
banner.
there an issue with that before? Because we tried to do that at South Perth when we had the projector. What are you growling at? It's your own reflection, you dozy dog. Wasn't that an issue with trying to project
With the
from
lighting?
from the same laptop?
No, we've got the multiple
stop.
laptops now.
It's not okay.
So, but yeah, I want to go and try that out and see how that looks and make sure it works, because it's something that players have mentioned that they want to have a time clock visible from anywhere in the room. So I'm going to try and do that. And the new venue that we're going to try out for May also includes AV gear.
It's a smaller room. It doesn't have as many tables. I'm not a huge fan.
There are a lot of benefits to it.
There might be, but there are some major downsides to it. That's enough.
That's
Come
your
on, That's
reflection.
your own reflection. Come on. Hop on.
Genius, dog. Genius.
Hop on.
Doggy is growling at ghosts. No,
Hop on.
Doggy is looking at a reflection of herself in a glass door and still doesn't understand what it is because she's a bit thick.
That's enough. You're too loud.
So I might try and organise another walkthrough to test out the AV stuff, and I might stream that for people just so they can check out the venue before we go there.
Yeah.
So it's about 6 weeks away. So
Is it?
22nd and 23rd of May.
I'm not sure.
5.5 weeks.
4.5 weeks, maybe. Oh, well, whatever.
Doesn't matter.
It's a few weeks away.
So
Do you have a June event?
that's the Crusade one that I'm still trying to work out how to write a player's pack for.
Fair enough.
I don't really know what that looks like at the moment. I'm still trying to figure that out because I've got to publish the War Calls one now that we've actually got the dates confirmed and locked in.
One of our children has just come out. Would you like me to take the dog? So the dog stops making noise and has then proceeded to make as much noise as physically possible. And if they don't look at what they're doing, there's going to be water spilling all over the floor from the fridge.
Would it be time turns or just a doomsday clock for everyone? So I would term it a master clock. So if the round is 3 hours, I would put 3 hours up on the clock and start the timer.
Yeah.
And then using chess clocks, obviously each player in theory gets an hour and 30. Now we did see the chess clock side of things run at Ironman, not with a death clock, but pretty close. Like it's a pseudo death clock in some ways. Because the true death clock just means you don't get to play and your opponent does. Whereas in this case, you were allowed to make saves and required stuff.
But not all the tables use death clocks, chess clocks.
Not all of them did, but it was strongly suggested they did because they only had 2.5 hour rounds. So
I'm not sure how that would have worked because either you've got everyone doing that, so once you've used half your time...
Well, there was one case where one of the guys timed out and his opponent went, we got 40 minutes left, I've got, like, your army was 4 times the size, I'm happy for you to use my time. And cleared it with, like...
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works when, like I said, not all tables were using chess clocks.
Apparently our dog set off Ben's dog in Albany.
Ah, you're welcome.
Sorry about that. Geez, dog scared the crap out of me walking around checking a building. You're welcome, guys. So yeah, we would do a master clock where regardless of what your chess clock said, once we hit 0, that's the end of the game. So the player's incentive at that point is to make sure your chess clock, if you get to your table and you finish all the setup and, you know, you look at the wall and you go, oh shit, we're 15 minutes in, then you have to make sure you've adjusted your chess clocks when you start deploying to make sure that you've got
7 minutes each less.
Yeah. So that would be something that you'd have to consider. That being said, we do have a pretty reasonable, like I was looking at the numbers from the weekend, and again, at 2 hours 45, we were getting games vastly, with the majority finishing. So 3 hours feels to me like it should be an easy thing now.
Look,
I don't play as much as some of these guys do, and I was finishing games in less time.
Yeah, you're also a very experienced player that's been playing for decades. That's not where I was going with it. So
Okay.
Out of those games, I would say that there were at least 2 games each round that struggled to finish in time. So there were at least 2 games each round that I was going round at the end of the round and going, well, apart from round 3 when I was sleeping at the end of that round. But the rest of them going around going, hey, wrap it up. How you going? What's happening? Are you scoring? You tell me you're still playing. The clock's finished. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I do also have some thoughts around whether or not people are actually finishing the game or they are still going through that process of talking through the end of the game.
Yeah.
Now, part of the issue that we've got is when people talk through the end of the game and then they mark it that they've played 5 rounds, we're in a situation of going, oh, well, everyone's finishing. We can see that everyone's getting 5 turns in.
Yeah.
But actually they're not. They're getting 3 turns in and talking through the other 2 turns. And it's in the players pack that people shouldn't be talking through turns. We can't go around and police that.
We can't enforce it, no.
So, to be doing that, then you need to have
multiple extra
We need
helpers.
to have a judge for pretty much every table.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers from the weekend on screen now. You've got someone like Jared Dennis, who was playing a Titan. His average game was 3.67 turns.
Yeah.
Now, that's not because he wasn't finishing games. It was just because that's how many turns he was getting before he got tabled.
In fairness, I think he did very well to get an average of 3.67.
Hugh's average was 4. Hugh actually spent more time on the table than JD. He didn't do any better as a result, but he spent more time on the table.
And he did worse as a result. But again, that was because Jay stuffed up. And so Hugh ended up being able to stay on the table longer for one of those rounds. So it averaged out.
I wonder what would happen if I took out their game from their averages as well, because they played in the final round.
So the round that Hugh played against Jay would have bumped Hugh's average up. The round that JD played against Hugh would have bumped JD's number up.
Yep. So what would that have looked like? But also because this...
To be fair, they both got about 30 minutes playtime for most of the games.
And look, the problem with this number is, like we've just highlighted, is if you've been tabled on turn 2, that's obviously going to bring your average turns down. So, that's a factor. And the data here that we have, I don't think it shows me, if there was a tab that showed me how many tablings, like how many times they'd been tabled in a tournament, that'd probably be really useful, because then you could scroll down to JD and go, oh, he was tabled 4 times. That's why he only got 3.67 turns.
Yeah.
But we can't do that. So that's another sort of component to it. That might freak out the noobs. We've all been down the first game hour-long turnitis. That is true. And I think when the Toy Soldier Cartel ran the Ironman, they did it very cleverly in saying, this isn't a tournament for everyone. This is a tournament where you're going to be timed and you're going to be managed, and there is no room for anything other than hard and fast stop. And there were a couple of players, it was their first tournament, and that was a hell of a trial by fire for anyone to go and play at. But at the same time, the vast majority of the players in that room were experienced generals who had written armies for that event, knowing that they had the time constraints they did. So, they had in their players pack for Battleforged, instead of giving 10 points for having a Battleforged army, it was 2 points per battle round completed. So the only way you scored 100 was if you finished all 5 turns and maxed your score. And I don't mind that, because if you got tabled, you'd still get the full 10, because you have to...
I was going to say, that's what I think.
Because you'd completed the game.
Yeah.
So I would say, if you got tabled turn 3, and your opponent has 15 minutes left to finish off turns 4 and 5, then you would still get... Because the game has been completed, and even though... they've scored for 5 turns, even though you got tabled earlier, the game has still naturally completed. And
I'd like to see that for down under pairings as well.
Well, that's...
when you look at JD's times, I'm just bringing JD out because
Yeah.
he played most of them. He was at about half an hour game time.
Well, I actually had his average game time on the screen as well.
But is it possible to bring
So
up...
JD's average game was 53 minutes.
Yeah. And I'd say that his average game was probably lower, and then there were a couple where... Anyway, yeah, averages work the way averages work. But I'd be interested to see who JD's opponents were and see how many turns they finished. Because for me, I think that JD should be... So if all of his opponents... Well, apart from Hugh in his last round who didn't finish the 5...
Well, it'll certainly skew their number, yeah.
You know, so I think if your opponent does the 5 turns, then your game lasted 5 turns.
And that was something else I was just rolling in my head then, going, should we be telling players that in the event that they're tabled, they still put 5 turns down?
Yes, I think so.
They might have to.
Because otherwise we're looking at averages without... For me, I feel like
it's missing data the way it is now. We need to have the data that says they were tabled.
Yeah, because we're looking at it. If you show me how many people finished in, like, sort of by how many rounds they finished, how many turns they had per round. So you've got
a whole bunch of them on 5.
12 on 5, and then how many down the bottom?
There are 4 with less than 4 as the average.
But we know that at least one of them, all of his opponents had 5 turns. Well,
yeah. Well, no.
No,
3 of his opponents had 5 turns because he won a game.
He had 5 turns in that round. So he should effectively say 5. So we're having to look at this and go, okay, but how many of those is because of tablings? And I know that and when we're trying to look at data, then we go, okay, well, let's go into
the individual rounds
to
see
the
what
4th one
happened.
there is Mike. Let's go into Mike's one and go through and go, well, what did his opponents do? Oh, okay, well, we don't need to look at that because we know that. So...
Yeah, look, that's a very good point, and maybe that needs to change with the way we're gathering data so that we're actually looking at did the game complete versus oh no, it's you've got less than 5 because you actually didn't finish the game.
And I think for me it doesn't matter, and maybe we have another tick box where you tabled, you know, or something like that. If is that important for us to know? For me, I don't find that important to know.
Well, that tick box does exist. It just isn't data that I get access to.
Yeah.
As a standard set of data, I'd have to go to diff and say, hey, is there some way of displaying this here with a column that says...
I was counting then.
You know, scroll down. Average amount of time, or amount of times tabled, so that you can look at JD's and go, his average was 3.67 turns, but he was tabled 3 times. So out of 4 games, we know 3 of those was a tabling.
Yeah.
And I think that would mean that these numbers mean more.
Yeah.
Because the other option is to just say if you got tabled and the game still gets 5 turns, then you just put 5 in.
Yeah, and that's, for me, I think that's what we do. So we're looking at this. We've got 13 people who scored between 4 and 5.
Yeah.
But looking at it going, okay, well, Hugh's scored 4 turns. Well, his average is 4 turns, but we know that he was tabled.
Yeah, all
and
5.
To be fair, he was tabled in all 4 games, so
yeah.
he's possibly not a good person. Well, actually, no, he is the right person to be looking at. He was tabled in all 4 games, therefore he should be sitting in the 5 bracket.
Yeah. And
whereas, have we got somebody who, who's sitting in that 5 bracket, who didn't necessarily finish all of those 5 turns, but who at the end, because I heard it, we're just talking through what this round would look like.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying they talked through the turn as opposed to what we have in there as being okay, which is where they talk through... You explain the difference because I can't articulate it.
It's basically just players padding their scores is the issue.
Yes, but so we say that you can't talk through turns, but it's okay to... So the person who's gone first hasn't... So it's okay to resolve things and...
Oh, if you get to the bottom of 4 and you've got 5 minutes left and you go, cool, I'm moving here, and you're moving here, and we've got the time, that's the score, that's fine. It's when you've got 5 minutes left and you're at turn 3 and you go, well, in my turn 4 I've got enough guns that dies, and that probably dies math-wise, and then that means that I score this, and this, which means that you can't score this, and this, which means in your turn 4 this happens, and you kill this and this, and then I table you, and, you know... It's where you're essentially fudging the scores to artificially boost numbers.
But at the same time, if one player has had 4 turns and the other player's had 5 turns, then you would go, okay, we'll talk through what happens for that player's...
It's not even talk through. It's a case of, okay, there's a 10 or 15 minute break between the rounds. Anything that you don't need to... Like, you look at the table and go, cool,
Snowy.
What can I actually score this turn? And the question then becomes, okay, cool, I can score my primaries without killing anything, so there's no dice rolling. I can score while we stand, we fight, because it's still on the table, so there's no dice rolling. I've got bring it down. I can still score 2 more points. So you roll the absolute minimum number of shots required to... You're basically just trying to minimize the dice roll so that you're not making up the score. Like in my second game, we had plenty of time, but I had 1 point on the table that I left because we went... I squad down to 1 model, charged it with 2 things, which should have very easily killed it, and he made like 8 invulnerable saves and didn't die. Despite being on 1 wound and...
Don't you hate that?
Well, between that and another combat in a similar scenario, it cost me 4 points in the final round. 4 battle points. Mm-hmm. So it would have changed my 17 to an 18 in the differentials. But, you know, like... That sort of thing where you can score points is what you go, okay, cool, let's roll this out. How long does it take me to roll out my Archon? 7 attacks, 6 hits, 4 wounds, invul saves, dead, we're done. And it takes all of, 10 or 15 seconds to resolve. It's when you sit there and you go, oh, okay, I want to kill that. Does it score you anything? Well, no. Then why are we... Like, does it change the game for you to kill that model? No. Don't do it. And that's kind of what I've been trying to instill in players is look at the table. Anything you can score that you need to roll dice for, you need to do it fast and you need to do it appropriately. So, as opposed to just going, oh, well, that shoots that and that, I kill that. It just doesn't lead to good results. I versed JD round 3 and had 5 turns. You don't count, Ben. You're the anomaly.
No, if Ben had 5 turns, we would expect that.
No, I think he's saying JD had 5 turns.
Well, you just said he had 5 turns.
Okay.
I was thinking, well, yes.
You'd still have your turn. It would just be over quick. Yeah, and that's kind of what we're talking about is, I've got no models on the table, your turn.
Yeah, exactly.
Seb says, if no dice rolls are needed, then it's a fair game. If dice are needed outside of something like I just have 1 grot versus 10 marines, if you just have time to roll it out, if you don't, too bad. Yeah, look, if you've got 10 intercessors that need to kill 1 grot in close combat that you've just charged into, the reasonable player will go, you know what, there's 40 attacks from those intercessors against 1 toughness 2 target. The chances of him surviving are so minuscule that I will be gracious and just take him off. That sort of, cooperative relationship at the table is really important. So movement and things that aren't chance are okay, but as soon as there's RNG, it's not allowed. Sort of. If Emma and I are playing, Emma's had turn 5 and she's fully resolved it. We hit my movement phase. We've got 2 minutes left. I finish my movement phase and then it's time up. My expectation as a TO would be, okay, cool, you can score anything you can score normally. Have a look at anything that needs to be resolved to score more points and only resolve those things that are fair and reasonable. If you go, I've got to kill that 30 Orc Boy unit there and I'm going to have to shoot my entire army to do it because they're in cover with a custom force field and feel no pain, that's no longer a reasonable expectation because there's no guarantee of it happening. If, on the other hand, those 30 Orc Boys are replaced by 5 grots in the open, that's a reasonable result to sort of fast dice out if you really want to be that guy and not just pull them when there's 30 or 40 guns pointed at them. I think it's just a bit of common sense and give and take with your opponent to be reasonable about what the expectation is. Barring horde armies, you should be able to get a game done in 2.5 hours easy. Look,
I think it depends.
Well, I hadn't even bothered to look at my scores on the weekend. So my average turns was 5 and my average game was 1 hour and 49 minutes.
Does that take that over the 4 games though, or does that only take into account the 2 games?
As far as I know, it's given me 5 turns and I dropped at the end of turn 2, so it's only game 2, sorry. So it's only taking into account the 2 games. So I played for less than 2 hours on average, both those games. So, but like you said, I'm more experienced than a lot of players in terms of decision making more than anything else.
And your first game wasn't necessarily a very good matchup for your opponent.
Did you hear what he was saying prior to that game, like prior to me doing the pairings?
Yes, I did.
I'd really love to see you play. I'd love to see how good I see if you're any good. I'd love to play against you and see how you go.
He never said he would love to play against you. He just said, I'd like to see you playing more, Mike. And
I'd love to play you as well.
I didn't hear that. I just heard, I'd like to see you playing more, Mike. And then the pairings went up and it was very much, I've changed my mind,
yes.
Mike. Anyway, so that wasn't necessarily a great matchup for that opponent. So
no.
While you've got, yes, you're a more experienced player, but also you've got someone who, wasn't...
He wasn't anywhere near as experienced as I am.
He wasn't as experienced as you were. And he was playing an army that's struggling in this edition. Do you like how well I'm filtering this? I deserve a gold star for filtering.
He was playing Tau.
But I'm not saying anything against Tau, because I dug myself a big hole there. I didn't check if he had panel lining.
No, he didn't. He had a good list, actually. It was a more... And we were talking about this the night before in terms of Tau and stuff, and it was interesting having that conversation with him because he's clearly put a lot of thought into the list he's running, because he's when I said to him, no, like, I think most of the Tau players need to try and reinvent the wheel, because at the moment what they have doesn't work for the way that they used to play. You need to actually take a step back, change, and start trying new combinations and new units rather than just going the same old broadside riptide scenario.
Yeah, look,
and we had a good conversation about that, because it was like, what would you say? And stealth suits and bombers. I've been trying the bombers. This is what I was experiencing. So I feel like there's that. It's really good to see he's a relatively new player coming in and going, cool. So the conventional wisdom is this. It doesn't work. It
doesn't work in this edition.
No. So let's try new things. And I think that's great.
As much as
it didn't work against Drakari, but it's good to see him try.
But as much as I joke about Tau, so I joke about Tau. Put that aside. There is this idea that Tau are
John Doe, let's just say it. Tau equals space gingers.
I am not saying that, John. So Tau have perhaps a reputation at the moment of not being a great force.
You couldn't even say it with a straight face.
I'm trying to put it as gently as I can, but how'd Marcus do?
Marcus did well, actually.
Playing Tau.
Yeah.
So I know when you just rearrange something, he was coming in 3rd or 4th, depending on how you sorted it.
I think he finished 5th or 6th. Like, he did pretty well for the weekend. I think he was 3-1.
Loss or draw?
Make me open it again.
Oh no, it's fine. But I'm just saying that it's got a reputation of not. I don't even know how I went down this rabbit hole. It's got a reputation of not being great, but there are people who are still performing well with Tau. My original point was you've got someone who's experienced playing against somebody who's less experienced with an army that's got a reputation for not being very strong at the moment. There was no way that was likely to go down to the wire.
Marcus finished 2nd.
You just said 4th or 5th.
Well, I was wrong. It was when I resorted it. He dropped to 4th. Yeah, that's what
I thought when you resorted.
But no, he finished 2nd with 3 wins.
Yeah.
Actually, it could be 2 wins and 2 draws, to be fair, with that round points. I'd have to go and have a look at the rounds.
So you got 6 round points anyway.
Won't be hard to check. So he drew round 1, so there must be 2 draws in there. It's the only way you can get 6.
Ooh, excuse me, sorry.
So he only won. So it was a draw for round 1. It was 82-80. So that was.
So Marcus, that was a win to Marcus.
That was a technical win to Marcus.
Went down to a draw. Well, it was a technical draw, but anyway, whichever way you want to look at that.
And then he 20-0'd his opponent in round 2. Then he...
Where's he gone?
He 15-5 win in round 3, which means he must have drawn round 4. 60 a loss, 61-63 points. So a draw down to a loss. So he'd go from 2 wins and 2 draws to 3 wins and a loss.
which would have taken him from 6 up to 7.
No, he would have stayed at 6. 3 wins and a loss at 6.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I apologise.
Yeah.
I was giving them 1 point for a loss.
Were there many guard players at Linebreaker? No. I don't actually think there was a single guard player, to be fair. All of our regular guard players in the Perth metro area didn't attend. It was a weekend of Xenos and Chaos, to be fair. Lots of Xenos. Drakari, Tau. I don't remember seeing any Orcs there, mind you.
I didn't see any
There
orcs.
were Necrons. Quite a few Necrons. Lots of Demons. The Imperium was definitely not the majority like it usually is. Tim Hales, I think it's more that it has a reputation for being a bad play experience.
I'm not sure about that, Tim. I would say... Oh, hang on. Is he talking about Tau? Before I go into this.
I don't know.
Okay. Tim, what's got a reputation for being a bad play experience before I go into my thoughts on that? What does that say? Were there many...
guard players at Linebreaker?
Yeah, you just said that. Sorry, I thought you said good players.
It's funny because we...
subjective.
Over the last few years of running events, I have a handful of guard models that have been slowly accumulating out in the dungeon. Almost enough for a full 10-man squad.
Oh, is that from people leaving them
from people leaving random...
Actually, wouldn't they...
There were 2 models left on the weekend, neither of them are guard.
Yeah, that's right.
I have to start a Death Guard army, or... Actually, that's not true. I know who owns them, so they'll get those models back.
It's Leon, I think,
Yeah.
isn't it? So, Leon, if you're watching this, then we've got them.
So, he'll get his models back.
Okay, he was talking about Tau. I wonder, Tim, whether or not that, about it being a bad play experience was in 8th edition.
I think part of that comes from when you look at a Tau army compared to a more traditional army of any sort. Most armies interact and function across the majority of the turn. Like, not everyone has a psychic phase, but there's maneuvering, there's shooting, there's combat, there's mobility and dynamism that occurs throughout the game. Tau takes the game in terms of the traditional method of playing Tau and goes, we sit here and we shoot you, and then you charge and we shoot more, and then we shoot more, and then we shoot more, and the level of interactivity feels like it declines because they're only playing essentially 1 or 2 phases of the game where you're there playing 3 or 4, and every time you do something it feels like, I get to shoot, I get to shoot, I get to shoot. And I think that's where a lot of the bad reputation comes from, because they're not playing the same game you are. It's not necessarily their fault, it's the way they're designed. But it generates a lot of feels bad moments where you can outmaneuver and do this and do that. I'm going to charge you from here. Cool, my entire army gets to Overwatch. So I think that's where the feel bad comes from, rather than it being the player's fault. It's just a natural knock-on effect of the way the army's been designed. And
yeah, I do think that in 8th edition Tau was supercharged. I don't know. It had a reputation of being...
Leon's there. Yeah, I am here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, yeah, hit us up. We got your models. I think that, in 8th edition, Tau had a reputation for being a very strong army. And I think that when there's reputations, and we would preface this, I think that when there's reputations, people turn that into a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
I think also, and I'm going to say that as much as I do joke about it, a lot of the players who I know who play Tau, I get along really well with, and I can have a real laugh and a joke with, and I think they're genuinely nice guys. I've never played against them, so I don't know what they're like to play against, but I think there's a lot of prefaces and a lot of clauses that I'm putting in. I think they're genuinely nice people. I also am in a lot of forums, and Tau players get a very bad reputation.
Mm.
Now, is that because Tau attracts a certain kind of player? In the same way that...
Yeah, Tim's agreeing with you. To be clear, he's not blaming the players. He's talking about the design philosophy through 7th and 8th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think... I wonder whether or not... In the same way that when we talk about tournament players, and when we first started OBSEC, I'd heard all about these hardcore tournament players and how awful tournament players were, and they're cutthroat even. Not cutthroat, I don't know what that is. So, and they're just... Nobody wants to go to tournaments because they're win-at-all-costs kinds of people. And I kind of went in and went, well, where are they? Because I'm not experiencing that. So I wonder if there are places where the kinds of people that were attracted to Tau
Hey, Charles.
added to that potentially being a negative play experience. And then that gets talked about and that gets put into different forums, and people then take that on as a belief. And then when you're playing against those players, where there's small things that might happen in any game, when it happens in a Tau game, you're like,
Here
it's
we
a
are
Tau
again.
player, what do you expect?
Yeah. Look, I definitely feel like there was a series of, since they came out in third, then they got a big upgrade in fourth, and then we've had new units periodically over the years as the game has progressed. Some of the shenanigans that they were able to pull, particularly through 7th and 8th editions, frustrated players. And it's not helped by a lot of the publicity that when you have some of the top tier players at major tournaments taking them and pulling some of these janky maneuvers out.
But at the same time, if that's what your army does, then why would you not do janky movements?
No, exactly. And I mean, we see it happening at the moment with there's a combination with Deathwing Terminator bodyguards and a Ravenwing Talonmaster. The Deathwing bodyguard rule says that as long as they're within 3 inches of a character, you can't target that character. So people are putting those 2 Deathwing Terminators behind a wall out of line of sight, and then the Talonmaster out the front.
Yeah.
And he's a vehicle, and he's completely untargetable. So people are going, well,
yeah, that feels a bit
how the hell does that work? And it's that's what I'm talking about with the jank, because there was a moment in time where you could have a Riptide on one side of a solid wall, and then shield drones out of line of sight behind the wall, and you're shooting at the Riptide but taking the drones. And that's, I think some of that sort of thing can creep in when you have players winning major events and getting the publicity around doing it and how they did it. That can also breed some negativity in the community. It's one thing when you win a tournament, people watch the finals and go, yeah, he won that fair and square. He maneuvered really well. I remember there was a game I watched, one of the LVOs, with Alex Harrison playing Craftworld Eldar Flyers back at the tail end of 8th against a Guard Knight combo. And that game was really good to watch. Yes, he had a multitude of Eldar Flyers, but it was a really interesting tactical game to play because the Guard player was really talented. And it was the Eldar planes felt a little bit janky at that point in time in the game. But the game, if he'd won or lost that game, it didn't matter because the game felt really good. And it didn't feel, oh, well, I can't do anything about that on the table. So I don't know if it articulated that particularly well, but Charles, finally caught us live on YouTube.
We're about to.
It must be the morning for him.
Yes.
Josh Alberts, from my experience with Tau in 9th, at least it seems like the lists that do very well are the ones that quickly move around the board, bonking armies on the head. Or at least
that'd be the technical term.
Yeah.
With on the head.
Yeah. I will admit one of the things we talked about was that sort of style of play where it was a fluid, dynamic army on the table, but you just have to shore up the way you deal with it because you don't have the assault element that a lot of those armies tend to have. Gunlines aren't really that powerful anymore considering that most armies can cross the board turn 2. If you're lucky, it's turn 2. A lot of armies like the Slaanesh Demons and some of the Drakari combos can do a turn 1 charge. So you can't afford to be stationary in the game at the moment, particularly not with the way you score. Seb says, to back you up on that, Emma, I'm starting a Tau army. So it does attract that kind of player.
See?
You going to dye your hair orange, Seb?
No. We can't even edit that out.
Well, someone said it earlier in the comments.
No, that's okay if they said it. You're not allowed.
All right, fine. Charles says, one reason in 8th is, as an opponent, you just remove models as they shot you. When they tried to shoot back, they do drones, so nothing happens. And if you tried to charge, you got overwatched to death. Total non-interaction playstyle. And that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. It is a lot better now in 9th edition, but it's almost swung to the point where as a Tau player, you kind of have to do what Marcus does, which is just go, oh, cool, so I can shoot you with 3 broadsides, or I can shoot you with 9 broadsides, so that when you inevitably get a charge off, I've still got more of them. So you kind of end up overloading to try and counterbalance the way the game plays at the moment. And I just feel like you either have to do that, or you have to go, no, you know what, I'm going to try and reinvent and do something completely different.
I think that's healthy.
I think the Codex needs some really big help, but I don't know how to help it in... Like, I've got ideas, but I don't, like, the time it'd take to test it and work it out, that's not, like, someone else gets paid for that, I don't, so. Seb says he can do. Richard says he has a Tau army.
Wow. So you guys just keep adding the...
Seb says, is that selling my soul or giving it away, though?
I'm not
allowed to. She'll kill me if I say anything. Well, we've been on nearly an hour and a half now. So I'm thinking that we might call it a night.
I think that's a good idea.
I've got more painting to do.
I've got a wedding ceremony to run.
Yeah, so we've both got some other work to do. Thank you very much for joining us, though, for this rambling conversation. I just want 9 broadsides on the table. To be fair, if you bought 9 genuine broadsides, you deserve to put them on the table because they're like $90 each. So there's a lot of money invested in doing it.
There's a lot of money invested in every army.
Some points to model ratio is worse than others. As we talked about before, the Gene Stealer cult. I wonder whether their win-loss ratio is also determined by the fact that so few people play them because they cost so much to get into. Anyway, it'll be very interesting to see what GW do with gunline armies like Guard and Tau when the codexes finally arrive 2 weeks before 10th edition in 2023. I think they're far closer than you would expect. I think...
10th edition could be just as close, though.
I think there's every chance that by this time next year we will have at least one, if not both, of those 2 books. I think the chances are we will get the books in rapid fire succession. All that they'll potentially do is while they're on a slowdown in terms of production, you'll get stuff that doesn't require anything more than a book or maybe a single model. Things like Demons are a really good candidate for that. Harlequins are a good candidate for that, where they don't actually need to release too many models to update the range. Look at the coming AdMech book. They're releasing 1 model, here you go, here's your book, everything's in one place, done. And I think that we'll see a bunch of that across this year while they return to something resembling a normal production schedule, and then the start of next year we'll start seeing it cranked out again once they're back on track.
And fingers crossed. I mean, I'm not in the UK, but gyms have opened up. I think pubs have opened up, so everything seems to be opening back up again.
Charles says, points to model ratio, a mech gun is $50 for 40 points. I think the Gene Stealer cult still trump it, because here in Australia, it's basically $2 per point. Because it's $77 for 35 points of Gene Stealer Acolytes. It's pretty terrible. And obviously with the mech guns, you hit a point where you can't take any more of them, whereas these are troops for the Gene Stealer cult, and they're actually worth taking, so you end up wanting 20, 40, 60, 80 of them, and at $77 for 5, it's pretty brutal. There's a reason why most of mine are the snap fit ones from Overkill, because you could buy Overkill for $200 and get like 20 of them plus all the other bits that went with it, so it was actually cheaper to do it that way, and you could sell the Death Watch off.
You didn't, but you could.
I did. I sold half the Death Watch off. I kept because I bought it twice, so I kept one of the kill teams and sold the other kill team. I don't know why you're surprised at me doing that. I'm not
surprised.
No, exactly. All right, I think we're out of here. Yeah. Have a good night. Stay safe, everyone. I will be intermittently streaming in between rounds on the weekend on Sunday at the tournament with my Drakari.
He says this. He probably won't.
I'll jump on. They won't be live during the game. It's just not possible because it is a team event, so there's other stuff going on. But I'll jump on and give updates as the day goes on. In the meantime, I think that's it for now.
It is.
All right. We'll see you guys later.
Toodaloo.